Hello, everyone. Welcome to this year's Coffee Retail Summit. My name is Kim Elena Ionescu, and it is my pleasure to introduce this year's event. It has been almost a year since the FCA launched the first Coffee Retail Summit, and honestly, it's difficult for me to compare where we are as a coffee industry now versus where we were and the circumstances that we faced 10 months ago. Part of that can be attributed to the fact that I don't work in retail myself. I work for the Specialty Coffee Association, and part of it is due to the uncertainty that characterizes this era. More significant than either of those facts, however, is the diversity factor. As the specialty coffee industry continues to grow, it is more apparent every day that there is no singular approach to or formula for success in this global community. The 2022 Coffee Retail Summit will highlight a variety of thought-provoking examples of retail growth and adaptation across three major coffee consuming regions: Europe and the UK, the United States, and Korea. Today, we will explore some of the key factors that are impacting retail businesses in Europe and the UK, and we appreciate the support of the key partners who have made this possible. Thank you to Astoria, the title sponsor for the Coffee Retail Summit. Thank you also to BWT Water and to Simonelli Group. And thank you to Brewista, Chemex, and Baratza. I have already revealed that I don't work in a retail business now, but like many people who work in specialty coffee in the United States where I live, my first job in the coffee industry was as a barista. I worked at the second location of an independent cafe in North Carolina that had only been open a month or so when I walked in looking for a job. It was owned by two women, one of whom had many years of experience in coffee in other parts of the United States, and the two of them had spied opportunity in the nascent specialty coffee culture and the comparatively low rents presented by the medium-sized southern city where I lived. By the time I left, the business, which was about 2 years old, was struggling to keep up with the challenges presented by having two stores. We frequently ran out of milk, which resulted in the owner making frantic trips to Costco, a warehouse club, and me apologizing to frustrated customers looking for cappuccinos. The shop was never profitable enough to have more than one person working behind the bar at any time, and so I got used to either the space being full to bursting. There would be a line to the door, and kind customers would bring me air pots when they were empty because I couldn't get out from behind the counter to refresh the coffee at the self-serve station that the cafe had. Or it would be empty enough that I started bringing a book to work for those times when I'd finished cleaning and restocking, and I was completely alone in the space. Of course, milk shortages are not the root cause of an empty cafe, but they were part of the same vicious cycle. The struggle of the cafes also affected the owners. I watched them fall out of love with their business and out of love with each other during the time working for them, and not long after I left, they separated. A year later, they sold their two cafes to two different owners, and both of them ended up leaving the area. I imagine the story sounds familiar, at least to some of you. It's the story of my experience, but it's not unique. And while the specialty coffee industry has grown by an order of magnitude since 2003, when I began my first barista shift, the macro level growth has not made it easy to be consistently profitable at the level of the individual business, or even for some chains. Margins were tight and working hours were long, even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. At the Specialty Coffee Association, we do not kid ourselves that we are going to be able to rescue anyone's business, to say nothing of the marriages and other interpersonal relationships that may get inextricably tied up in those businesses. But from inside an operation, with its long hours, low profit margins, and endless tasks, as well as the constant changes that COVID rules and norms require of retailers, it can be hard to tell which problems can be solved by an individual business and which ones require collective action or outside intervention of some sort. Could those emergency trips that my boss was making to Costco have been avoided by hiring a manager for her two stores? Maybe. Would the business have benefited from the greater awareness of and excitement about specialty coffee that would arrive in the region a few years later? Definitely. Should the city have offered financial support to a small retail business like theirs when a construction project to build luxury condominiums downtown made it difficult for their customers to access them? I can't help but wish that it had, and wonder what might have been different. Also, though, not all retail businesses need to be rescued. While the past few years have been difficult for many coffee businesses and so many of the people who make them possible, some businesses have grown, especially those that have invested in e-commerce. Some have thrived and struggled simultaneously, revealing the fallacy of simple narratives about success. Over the course of this year's Coffee Retail Summit, we will hear from owners, managers, and longtime employees of businesses that are doing everything they can to succeed, including questioning what success looks like for them and whether their goals have changed from what they once were. One of the factors that drove the SCA to launch the Coffee Retail Summit in 2021 was the series of surveys on the impacts of COVID-19 on the coffee community that we conducted in 2020 and 2021. As my SCA colleagues discussed in a talk prepared for last year's Coffee Retail Summit, we were struck by the high proportion of responses from retailers and roaster retailers. While their experiences varied widely, many expressed a common desire to share knowledge and get information relevant to them. And it's not that they lacked information. We are connected online almost constantly, but inspirational stories of businesses pivoting and heart-wrenching stories of businesses closing, you know, these don't necessarily help anyone to understand what options they have, where to make investments, or why certain choices work better for some businesses than for others. The Coffee Retail Summit and its resource library make it easier to find information that is relevant to coffee businesses. More insight from industry peers and fewer feel-good or feel-bad stories written for the public. The reports you will find there use data about retail trends in aggregate and contextualize it in coffee, because it can be difficult to find yourself in the macro level. For those of you squinting at the screen right now, we are part of that red line, food, drinks, and tobacco. If you are joining us for the first time at this event, whether you are just getting your business started or have multiple locations and decades invested in your company, I encourage you to use the library to find topics that interest you. By the end of this week, articles and talks, including retail-focused RICO 2021 videos, will be available via topic highlights or search and filter functions under the heading Explore Library. We are also excited to release the 2020 US Market Overview this week, which provides an update on the retail value of coffee in the United States. And of course, at the conclusion of the event, we will upload this year's presentations to this library. So if you miss anything, you will be able to find it here at www.retail.sca.coffee. Our 2022 event will consist of 3 days of programming aimed at audiences in 3 different geographic regions. Today, we will focus on the UK and Europe. On Wednesday, we will shift our view to the United States and dabble in Canada. And on Friday, we will explore retail challenges and opportunities in Korea. This will mark SCA's first online event for the specialty coffee community in Korea, and all the presentations will be given in Korean. So if you are interested in that day's topics and presenters, but you are not a Korean speaker yourself, just be patient. We will subtitle the presentations to English before uploading them to the site after the conclusion of the event. In planning this year's event, we set out in search of speakers whose experiences reflect some of the greatest challenges and potential facing coffee retail businesses in 2022. Hiring and retaining a strong staff team in the midst of the Great Resignation, as well as building a culture that can support staff development. Pivoting across channels and products to meet your cafe customers at home or in a different aisle of the grocery store. Resilience to supply shortages, and using the data available, whether it comes from a report on national consumption trends or a report from your espresso machine. Today, we will hear retail strategies from Costa, a familiar international brand. Learn about the way Gales, a UK bakery, has kept its focus on what is most important to their business while growing rapidly, and be inspired by two coffee businesses in Switzerland finding creative ways to engage their customers. We will also stretch ourselves to explore new opportunities for retail technology, or at least it's a stretch for me to learn the tech vocabulary, and consider what we might learn from the evolution of luxury brands outside the coffee industry. All Coffee Retail Summit presentations will happen live, and we have built time into every session to take questions from all of you. I hope that you will use the chat window to ask questions of our speakers and share ideas with one another as we pursue a common goal to create a thriving, equitable, and sustainable retail coffee segment. Thank you again to our sponsor partners, Astoria, BWT Water, Simonelli Group, Brewista, Chemex, and Baratza. And thank you all for being here with us. Now, it is time for me to introduce my colleague Vicente Partida, SCA's Community Experience Officer, who will host our first session.